Hi TechWork, it's Natalie from Circuit Recruitment and welcome to another installment of Landing a Job 101. In this series, I'll be sharing one tip per video, taking you slowly through the whole process involved with landing yourself a new role. In my previous video, I talked about how to equip yourself with an impactful elevator pitch about yourself for interviews and networking scenarios. Now, if you want to know more on how to do that, then feel free to head over to my YouTube channel to view it there, along with many other episodes in this series. Now, in today's video, I'm going to cover off how you can best position yourself for a take-home tech challenge or an online tech challenge. Now, if you're just getting started in the tech space and you've never interviewed before, then you might not even be aware, but most interview processes do include some form of tech challenge or tech test that you take home and do in your own time. Essentially, your potential employer wants to see how you go about problem solving. And it's very different to having a tech interview because you're not really being tested on your communication skills here. You're actually being tested on your ability to problem solve, how you interpret the problems, how you go about creating a solution. Now, these kinds of tests are usually followed up by a technical interview where you're made to expand upon this challenge. For example, you might actually be asked to talk about what you would have improved upon if you had more time, or how to scale it, or why you made certain decisions. So it's very important to keep all this in mind before you even start the code challenge as well. Because if you're not clear on your logic and reasoning from the very get-go, or if you manage to find a similar solution online and do a cheeky copy and paste, you're probably going to end up falling flat later in the process anyway. Now, we actually saw a slight trend during the tech boom where there was really high demand for engineers, where companies actually started to do away with the take-home tech challenges and they started implementing online ones, which can be slightly quicker to complete and you do save a bit of time on hiring. But whether you like them or not, tech challenges are not going anywhere. Whether you're going to be completing an online one or a take-home tech one, it doesn't matter. They're still very much a part of the hiring process and they don't seem to be going anywhere. And therefore, it's very likely that you as an engineer are going to encounter having to complete one at some point in your career. So without further ado, here are my main tips on how to prepare for a tech challenge. Tip number one is to prepare your environment before you get started. Sometimes you have a very short time limit to deal with. Sometimes they might take a few hours and some of them might even take a few days. Now, if you make sure that your IDE is set up and you have all of the installation packages that you need before getting stuck into it, then you're not going to be caught up by any technicalities when you're trying to complete the code challenge. Because if you don't do this, then you might actually find that the tech challenge takes up way more time than you originally thought, especially if you're encountering roadblock after roadblock that have to do with your setup. Make sure you follow any instructions that have been sent to you by your recruiter or the hiring manager. This can really make or break your situation. And speaking of instructions, tip number two is to make sure that you really thoroughly read through any requirements properly, and you want to ensure that you're actually solving the problems that they're asking you to solve. You might think that coming up with a bad solution is the only thing that might bow you out of the process, but believe it or not, I've actually seen plenty of people get cold from an interview process because they've over-engineered a solution. Usually, the simplest answer is the right one. Now, if it turns out that they actually wanted something more complex and convoluted, then maybe that engineering team might not have been the right fit for you anyway. Now, this is not to say that you can't go above and beyond though. Going above and beyond and delivering extra is actually very different to over-engineering, overcomplicating, and solving problems that just don't exist. Now, speaking of going the extra mile, tip number three is to go ahead and exceed expectations if you can, but only if you have time and the ability to do so. Now, this part is very self-explanatory. You will be able to stand out from the crowd if you do this, but it's very time and situation dependent. So read the room before you waste your time going above and beyond on something that doesn't really matter. Tip number four is to provide annotations and explanations where possible. Ensure that you're being very clear about the decisions that you've made, why you've made them, and how it's best for them to read and use your code so that you can avoid any confusion once you've submitted it. Remember when I said that they're going to be asking you in the following interview to explain yourself and expand on what you do differently? You can actually tick those boxes for them before they even get to grill you about it. Now, this doesn't have to be 4 pages of documentation. It can literally just be a few extra lines that provide some clarity, and it really shows that you're forward thinking. Now, my fifth and final tip is not to be afraid to ask questions. Most of the time when people fail code challenges miserably, it's because they didn't have a solid grasp on what's actually being asked of them. I'm telling you from experience, it's incredibly hard for a recruiter to ask for extra time or a second chance for you to redo it, especially if you've made a silly mistake. Once you've failed, the client usually isn't interested in seeing another code challenge from you for at least a few years until they're sure that you've probably grown and changed as an engineer. Make sure you ask your recruiter to clarify with the team. Now, if your recruiter isn't responsive or doesn't care enough to help you on this, I actually would not be working with that person. Our goal is to make it as easy for you to get placed in that role as possible. And if you're dealing with somebody who doesn't care, that is a massive red flag. And same goes when you're liaising directly with companies and hiring managers. They should be wanting to set you up for success here, not setting you up to fail. Now, don't get me wrong, you definitely don't want to go asking lots of silly questions either, because that in turn will be a red flag for them. However, I'm sure you can use your common sense here and know exactly when it's appropriate to ask a question. Now, here are some extra bonus tips for you. Make sure that your code is clean and easily readable. Make sure you also demonstrate testing where you can. Try to include the edge cases too. I feel like a broken record here, but definitely ensure that your code meets the basic functional requirements. It is an instant fail if that is not the case. And lastly, suss out the platform that you're using, especially in cases when you're completing an online tech challenge. You might be following a link that takes you to a portal, and you might only be able to complete the code challenge on that portal. Most of those portals allow you to do some practice tests beforehand so that you can get used to what you're using, and that can be make or break. Finding a new role is never easy, but if you make sure that you're in a good position to smash those code challenges, you're definitely going to increase your chances at nailing an interview and landing those new roles. Now, let me know if there's anything I've missed in the comments. I'm always open to making more videos about your questions, so let me know if there's anything you want me to cover off. You can view the rest of the videos in this series on my YouTube channel that I will link in the video's description. But other than that, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, bye. As usual, thank you so much for watching, and until next time,